Hello. Hello, can we hear me? Yes. Hi, everybody. Did anybody see me on stage last night? There's going to be a little bit less JavaScript in this talk than what I did last night. Thanks so much for having me out to Copenhagen. This is my first time here. I'm having a lot of fun. This is a great place, although it is a little hot. We're going to make do. Hopefully, everybody has lots of water and doesn't overheat while we're in here. So this talk is called Success on Your Own Terms. And if you've seen me speak before, this is a little different than what I normally do. Normally, I would talk about debugging or maintaining JavaScript apps or web performance or something like that, or talk just generally about how great I am. This talk is instead about some really scary, painful, hard things that I've done and how it's helped me get to where I am today. It's like a lessons learned about success, what I've done, things that I've figured out along the way, and hopefully some things that you can all learn too. So the first question that I imagine is running through a lot of your heads is, why the fuck do I care what Todd has to say about any of this? And that's a very good question. It's the question you should ask before you take advice from anybody. So if you don't know anything about me, if you've never chatted with me before, I run my own businesses. I have so for about 10 years now. So I don't have a boss. I don't have any investors. I bootstrapped my companies. So I work with a small team of people. We build the software we want. We help our customers. And that's it. When we want to work, we work. When we don't want to work, we don't work. That gives me control of my time. It gives me control of my work. It makes me financially comfortable. And I have a platform to go and do awesome things like this, like fly halfway across the world to Copenhagen and host a silly JavaScript game show and give away prizes because I think it's fun. And that's really it. That's what my idea of success is right now. And so I want to talk about that. So this talk is going to be 6 stories. 6 stories about how I got to where I am today, painful lessons I've learned, and hopefully some things I can teach you so that you don't have to suffer quite so much as I did. 6 lessons that also helped me define what success is to me, because it's different to each of us. I think we're all after a little bit different things in life. And so the first question you should ask, well, the second question after, why the fuck do I care what Todd has to say? The second question you should ask is, well, what does success mean to you? Because it could mean a lot of different things. This whole talk is about professional success, but it doesn't have to mean the same thing to everyone, and it doesn't mean the same thing to you forever. It could mean money, time, prestige, notoriety, power, influence, or a combination of those things. And there's no judgment from me on which one you want, whatever makes you happy. But the first step in any journey is defining what you want. And if you don't define what you want, you're probably not going to find it. You're going to find yourself aimless and without purpose, kind of like I did. My first job out of college was for a company that manufactured giant spinning knives, which is a really cool way of saying I worked for a company that made lawnmowers. But saying they made giant spinning knives is a way cooler thing to say. So it was a little company that made lawnmowers, and it's literally so boring. I worked for Toro for 7 years, and it was comfortable. It was kind of easy. I didn't make a lot of money, but I made enough. I came into work, I put in my 40 hours, I went home, I played video games. I didn't really have any plans for my future, or what success would be for me, or what my career would look like. I was working a job. And then one day I got into a pretty bad car accident, a bad one. The seatbelt I was wearing at the time pulled in and punctured my intestines. And they were worried that I was bleeding internally. I was rushed into surgery, and I almost died in 2008. And it's amazing how fast everything in your life changes when you go through something like that. It had been months, years of me doing the same thing at that point. The same work with the same people. There wasn't anything pushing me to do better, to go faster, to learn more. I made okay money, I did okay work, and that was it. Then bang! I was in the hospital for more than 2 weeks, and another 6 months of recovery. And I remember lying in the hospital bed with this guy next to me, and this guy who had just gotten into a drunk golfing cart accident and just thought the whole thing was funny. But I was lying there thinking, man, I wish I had just gotten into a drunk golf cart accident. That would have been way a cooler story than just a car accident. And I was lying there just regretting how little I had done. I didn't have any cool stories about a drunken golf cart accident. If I had died that day, I would be a mid-level employee for a lawnmower manufacturer. And I would be replaced in a few weeks. And I always thought there would be more time. Another day, another week, another year to accomplish something, to have some stories, to put some color in my life. Which brings me to the first lesson, is that none of you have as much time as you think you do. You don't have as much time here as you think or as you want. And none of us know when it's going to end. This was one of the most significant experiences in my life. And it's one that I would never wish on anybody else. But it did light a fire under me, and it totally transformed what I was doing and what I wanted, and enabled me to do all kinds of other things in my life. And that day could have been my last day. And so it taught me to take the opportunities when you can. And so this is when I started putting my first thought into what I wanted out of life, what success would look like for me. And I wanted to work on something important. I hadn't worked on anything that anybody would give a shit about. I wanted to work on something that I could point to and be proud of and be like, that piece of software, I wrote that. I was part of the team that made that happen. I accomplished something interesting. I wanted to work on things that people knew about. And so if it all ended tomorrow for me, I would leave behind some work that I would be proud of. And that's my first story here, about how I found my way to actually give a crap about my own future and decide what I wanted to do. And I think all of you are already a little ahead of me in where I was then, because Todd, before 2008, wouldn't have been at a conference, wouldn't have been out here trying to better himself, wouldn't have been thinking about what he wanted to do. He was just at home playing video games on a evening, or working in a cubicle doing Jira tickets or whatever. So presumably, you already have some idea of what you want to do. So I wanted to work on something important. But this guy, nobody would trust this guy to work on anything important. I didn't have any confidence to do that yet. There were a lot of engineers and leaders around me that I looked up to that were building cool projects, influential at big companies or creating things. But I wanted to be that, but there was a lot of imposter syndrome happening. I thought at the time, hey, I'm probably not ready yet. I need to go learn more stuff about the world first. Business stuff. Stuff about what makes money and what makes something important. So my wife and several others I looked up to had gone back to school for a graduate degree in business, an MBA. And that seemed like a great idea. When I was building this slide, I went to one of those AI image generators and I typed in douchey-looking MBA guy. And this is what came out. And it looks disturbingly like Hannah's, who's not here. And I just made fun of him. Oh, that's too bad. So, all right, I thought an MBA, grad school, that'd be a great idea, and it would give me credibility to work on the important projects that I was after. And hopefully it would teach me not to screw it up too bad. So I enrolled in a grad school called the Management of Technology. It's kind of like an MBA for engineers. I met some really, really smart people in grad school. I also met some of the dumbest people I have ever encountered in grad school. Some of the dumbest people were the teachers. I had a marketing professor who was a real-life VP of marketing at a company that you've heard of that did not know how social media works. Could not fathom it, didn't know how to use it, didn't know why anybody would. I had a professor who sat on a dozen boards at big companies, and every single one of his presentations looked like this. That is 5 different fonts in 5 different colors with teeny tiny text, and it was just chaos. I couldn't ever like pay attention because I'm like, that is just so bad. How do I like read anything that you're trying to teach me? It was crazy. And I had an ongoing argument for a whole semester with my IT professor, who kept teaching us that agile projects were all doomed to failure, and that all serious companies followed a rigid software development lifecycle process. I am not sure that guy ever had a real job outside of academia. So I did learn a bunch of useful skills. I learned how to make accounting reports. I learned how to read between the lines on financial statements, how to think about project development and marketing campaigns and sales and that sort of thing. But the real thing I learned, the real thing that was worth $70,000 in tuition money, everybody is just making it up as they go. And you can too. Like when somebody says that as the head of marketing that this is their new strategy as the company, they just pulled that out of their butt. They don't know. Like there's no secret like knowledge, no secret tome that's going to give you the credibility to make a decision. Just use whatever your gut's telling you and go. And if it's not right, you can probably fix it later. Just because I don't know how to do something now, it doesn't mean that I can't start and figure it out as I go. There, look. I just saved you all $70,000. More, because that was like in 2010, so tuition's way up since then. You're welcome. So that's my story about smart people are sometimes really, really dumb, and you don't need to like think they're special and you can't do it too. So it was 2010, and I had recovered from my car accident, and now I had this fancy piece of paper saying that I was qualified to do important work. I could go after those prestigious projects I want. Now what? So I looked around at different jobs at places that did interesting things. But they all kind of sounded boring and the same. It felt like the same grind, the same work with a different logo on the wall. And that's when I met this guy. This guy, his name is Nicky Wicked. He was the guitarist in a band called Slave Raider. Did anybody ever listen to Slave Raider? No. All right, it was a metal band out of Minneapolis in the 80s. They got a little bit of play on like MTV, a little bit of notoriety. They were pretty good. I liked them. But when I met him, he didn't look like this. He had taken on a pseudonym called David Hussman. And he had hung up his guitar and joined the world of software. But he's one of the very few real rock star developers who I have ever met. And I use that term only to define both a person who has been a professional software developer and somebody who has been a professional rock star, which I believe there are a few of them else here at this conference. Even though he wasn't in a metal band anymore, he was still very cool. He's one of the coolest people I ever met. He could roll into a C-level meeting in shorts and sandals and get everybody to call him the dude and work with them to remove stupid things their companies were doing that stood in the way of the process. He would roll into a conference or whatever, and he would do like a 3-hour presentation at an Agile conference, and this would be his only slide. And he would just talk about this for like an hour, and it was captivating and interesting. This was Dude's Law, which is the value of doing something is just why are you doing it over how are you getting it done. And so you can make something more valuable by either finding better whys or getting rid of hows. And it was brilliant and simple, and you could use this to apply to so many conversations. He was super entertaining, and if more organizations thought like he did, we could get so much more awesome stuff built. David showed me a different kind of career, though, a different kind of success that was more about independence. David was his own person. He followed his own rules, his own dress code. He walked into an executive meeting with VPs at Disney and like just did not give a shit. And everybody still thought he was the expert in the room. Because he was. And he shifted my idea of what I wanted. And I saw a path to work on important projects, but without the corporate bullshit that I hated. So he introduced me to this world of staff augmentation. Has anybody, does that word translate here? Does staff augmentation, is that a thing here? Has anybody heard that word? Okay, so one person has heard that word. It's a really boring word. He didn't actually ever use this word. This is what like more professional consultants call it. Would use the word agile coaching because again he was cool. He saw a role as a coach for a team, helping them play the game of software development better. And so how this works is, hey, there's a company project. A company wants to do something cool. They probably don't have enough engineers on staff to actually pull it off because they're doing something new and cool that they've never staffed up for. And so they go to a consulting firm. Again, David wouldn't call it that. He called himself an agile dojo because he was just cool. And he could say that with a straight face and everybody just took him completely seriously. Even though, in retrospect, it's like, really? A dojo? You were a dojo? When he said it was cool. And that consulting firm would hire subcontractors to be coaches, which was me. He wanted me to be one of those. So that company that wants a cool project would say, hey, I need a bunch of engineers who know what they're doing, and they would hire them to work hourly for them and pull off something cool. And he wanted me to be one of those coaches. So that was really cool. Now this is not at all an unusual situation. There are lots of consulting companies just like this. Probably some of you work for them or have worked with them in the past. Now, for me, this was a big, scary leap. In order for me to do this, I had to give up my solid, dependable salary that had been the foundation of like my economic platform for a long time. And I had to start my own company so that I could be, an independent contractor. And I had a client ready to go that David had given me, but what if they hated me? What if the client didn't think I knew anything? What if they thought I was just some dumb kid? What if I couldn't find another client when that contract ended? Was this going to be a reliable way of working? But the scariest thing about it was that I was going to have to manage cash flow. So this change shifts from getting a paycheck reliably every 2 weeks with healthcare and retirement and all the good benefits that come with a normal job to, hey, you have to figure all of that stuff out yourself, and you have to send invoices for the hours you work, and then figure out how to get health insurance, and figure out how to save for retirement, and if you're sick, you just don't get paid. Like, it's an hourly job. You're just making a lot more per hour. When we were putting this together, I would be without a paycheck for about 12 weeks during the transition. And it was going to be financially tight, stressful, and pretty risky. Because at this point in my life, I had a mortgage, I had car payments. We had just had our second child that looks just like me in this photo. I'd actually taken, in order to pull this off, I had to take out a loan from my retirement account, which involves quite a bit of accounting trickery to cash flow through this whole process, which makes it extra stressful, is that like, if I did this and the whole thing collapsed on me, not only would I have given up a stable job and been laughed out of a bunch of consulting houses, but I would have like this big debt to pay back to my retirement account and like be out even more money than I would have been otherwise. My wife and I joked at the time that if this thing failed, I would have to go and live in my parents' basement again to get back on our feet if this didn't work. But to her credit, she still told me to go do it. And thinking back to grad school, remember, everyone's just making this up as they go. You can too. So I could too. And this is what I was shooting for. This was going to be independence. This was going to be more money. This was going to be prestige projects. So I went for it. And we made it. The client loved me. It was cutting through all the bullshit, and we would just talk about software and get things done. And I was good at building relationships and thinking through technology and all of the things that they were looking for. They wanted to extend me at the end of the contract, and I got to raise up my rates and make even more money. I worked on that first project that David helped me get for 18 months before moving on to something else when I chose to, when I was bored of it and wanted something new. As part of that project, I worked with some of the best engineers who I've ever worked with, people who would astonish me with the creative solutions that they could come up with. And there were some really hard technical challenges, just like most projects have. But the hardest part of that project, and any project, is building relationships. It's talking to people, building relationships, and creating teams of people who can actually get shit done. I can't do the work by myself. I can't decide what we need to build. I don't see all of the problems in any given market or any given product. But we can, a team can together. And so the key to being really successful as a consultant, or as an employee, or as a developer, or as a human being, is to make yourself indispensable in creating those relationships, in knowing how to bring people together so that you can accomplish things bigger than yourself. If you know everyone, you know who has the answer to every question. And so building relationships, the big single lesson I could condense from my entire time as an independent consultant is that learning how to build relationships is more relevant to your success as a person than any technical skill you learn. You could learn the latest JavaScript framework or how to do something in the new version of .NET or whatever, but if you have a choice between spending 80 hours doing that or spending 80 hours learning how to talk to other people and build high-value relationships, do that one. That one's going to put dollars in your pocket and opportunities in your life. The other one's just going to help you be better at software for the next 6 months, and then they'll be old again. So always choose communication skills over tech skills when evaluate what you need to be better at. Now, as just a brief aside, a few years ago, David Hussman died of prostate cancer, and it was very sad. It was a important moment where it was one of the first people who has ever been a mentor to me, kind of passed on, and it was an important kind of decision that I need to talk about this stuff more and pass that information on to other people to keep that alive. Consulting for me was great. I got to work on a bunch of really prestigious projects that I wanted to, and I was proud of the things that I got to build. And it made real impacts on the world. I also made really good money, more than double what I had been making as an employee. Literally double. From when I quit my last salary job till the last year I worked a salary job to the first year I worked as an independent consultant, my take-home pay doubled. It was that big of a contrast into how often employees are underpaid at their companies. I don't know if you're underpaid. That's just an anecdote about how underpaid I was. So I was making great money, but what I didn't have anymore was time. Now, fundamentally, I was trading time for money. I give you an hour of my time, and you give me some dollars. And if I wanted to keep more of my hours to spend time with my kids, or go to a conference, or do something crazy, then I just make less money. I wanted to find a way to keep more of my hours, but not really give up any money. So after several years of consulting, that definition of success shifted to me again. And it shifted into controlling my time. I didn't want to have to work 40 hours a week, at least not every week. Sometimes I wanted to travel or go to a conference or take some time off, or maybe I was really excited about a project and I wanted to spend 80 hours and just crush it. I wanted the flexibility to do that. Prestige was still part of my idea of success. I wanted to build something that helped people, that did something interesting. And money. Money's important. That may sound crass, but it is. Money enables you to control your time. Now, I'm not talking about like tech overlord money. I'm not talking about like Bezos, Musk money. I'm talking about guacamole money. There's this restaurant where I live called Chipotle. Do you have Chipotle here? Are you familiar with Chipotle? It's a burrito restaurant kind of thing. You go there, you get burrito bowls or burritos or whatever, and they make it in front of you. And at the end of the line, you can get guacamole added to it. But it costs extra. They're like, every time you ask for guacamole, they're like, oh, it's $1.25 extra. Do you still want it? I'm like, yes, I want it. Because what I wanted to have was guacamole money. What I wanted is that I never wanted to worry about getting the guacamole. We should never be financially tight about deciding I want guacamole on my burrito. So great. How do you do that? If you're not going to sell your time, you have to sell something else. You have to sell a product, an idea, a training, a something. And I had a lot of different ideas. I built proof of concepts of about 12 different products. But a mistake that I would make over and over again. Well, before I said, how many of you are trying to either building your own thing or have a side hustle where you're building a thing? Anybody? Yes? Nobody on this side of the room, though. All the hustlers are on that side of the room. These are all hourly employees completely content in your jobs. All right. Okay. All right, so I tried a lot of different things. I'd built like a couponing app. I had recorded some online training. I tried to do a paid blog once that wasn't ever going to work. Lots of different pieces of software. But a mistake that I would make over and over and over again is over-engineering, which is what I think is the biggest problem when engineers go to try and build a product, is that we're really good at engineering, so we want to do more of it. How much engineering can we jam into this product, regardless of whether or not it's a good idea? You decide, let's take, for example, that you decide you want to write a blog. Well, clearly, the first thing you have to do is write your own blogging engine, because none of the existing ones meet your unique needs for a blog. You couldn't just, spin up a WordPress site or a Ghost site or a whatever else. No, you have to write your own blogging engine because it's unique, and you want to do something that's for you in your own style. No, that's wrong, of course. You should just pick up GitHub Pages or Ghost or Medium or whatever. You don't write that yourself. The risk of over-engineering applies to anything you want to build as a developer, because we all have this tendency. Building is fun. Talking to our customers or figuring out marketing or doing sales, that's hard. I don't want to do that stuff. I just want to engineer everything. We find all the reasons to spend our time engineering. And I think if you come from a corporate world, this is especially hard. It's especially hard to avoid over-engineering. I think it's because the risks in like a corporate software engineering setting are different. We've shifted all of the risks about writing software away from that developer. When you're working in like an IT company or a bigger company, someone else has taken on the risk of the product failing. There's like the head of product or the head of marketing or some VP that's decided this is a thing we're going to build. And as an engineer, your job is just to like get it done. Get the feature done in a timely, performant, and reasonable way that won't create a bunch of work for you or your team down the road. And that's why we spend so much of our time talking about software quality at tech conferences, is because we're really just trying to address that risk of ourselves, of trying to build something that doesn't create work for ourselves in the future. But if you're building a product, that's not the real risks involved. We do this because we spend all our time teaching software quality and talking about it because we tell ourselves that if you don't do it right the first time, it's going to be harder to fix it later. A lot of like software craftsmen like boil down to this idea, or it'll never get fixed at all. But if you're an indie product developer, if you're just an indie hacker trying to build products yourself, those are not the risks that are relevant to you. Not even close. Even if you're solving a technically challenging problem, your only risk is whether you found a problem that is important for somebody to pay you to solve. That's it. That's the problem to solve. Until you've solved that, whether it's fast, whether it's performance, whether there's separation of concerns, whether you've written enough tests, whether the quality is there, none of those things matter. None of those things matter at all. They only matter once the first step is solved. And this leads to an important piece of software wisdom that many of you might have heard of before, because lots of people say this. If you're not embarrassed of your first version, you waited way too long to ship that product. You should be embarrassed of that code when it goes out to customers. If you're not embarrassed, then you're just screwing around over engineering. It's really hard to get your head around this, especially if you've spent time in big corporate teams, because everything about your old life will tell you that you're doing it wrong. This is dirty code. This is unprofessional. But that first time you sit down and you just hack something together, and it's just a one-file procedural code with no tests, and you just ship it to see if anybody uses it, then you're ready. Then you're ready to do this. Now, if you do find yourself lucky enough to have built something that is valuable and customers will actually use it, you've probably built something terrible with not quite so stable foundations. Maybe the whole thing is this cobbled together thing on top of WordPress that is embarrassing to everybody. But that's okay, because all of those important risks will come back around software quality. And people will say, hey, it's way harder to fix it now because you screwed it up. And that's true, but you probably built 10 things or 50 things or 100 things that were total garbage and nobody wanted. Then you could just throw that code away before you got to that one idea that worked. And now you only have to fix the one code base that you know is going to make money. So it's a lot harder to throw away code if you spent a lot of time optimizing it. And if you want to build something yourself, you're going to throw away a lot of code. That's a story about over-engineering, which is probably the biggest problem that I see when people want to get into building their own products, is they'll spend too much time building that. Now, the first product that I built that really took off was a product called TrackJS. And JavaScript, JavaScript is terrible, as you know, as we spent a whole evening laughing about. And so I built a way to figure out, hey, when JavaScript is terrible, can we find a way to know that it broke and record that? Lots of companies at the time were building JavaScript apps. It was the JavaScript renaissance. It was the era where Angular 1 came out and Backbone, we were fighting about Backbone versus Knockout at the time, if anybody remembers those days. But there wasn't any tooling to understand errors. We hadn't really wrapped our head around that all of this code that we were writing wasn't running in our servers or our cloud that we controlled. It was running in the end user's browser, in Internet Explorer 10, that who knows how that works. It's crazy. Now, I had this idea back in 2013, but I knew it was too big for me to take on by myself. There's too many different pieces involved. And that wasn't me over-engineering it. It was me, just thinking about all the different pieces that needed to go into it. And so I looked back at my time in consulting and thought of that lesson of building relationships is more relevant to the success of my products than my technical skills. And so I leveraged a bunch of those relationships that I'd spent time building consulting to pull together a team of people who I thought could help me. So I pulled together a group of people in my local area who were good at JavaScript and had this same indie hacky mindset that I did. And I gave us a deadline. I said, hey, here's this thing I want to build to monitor errors. And let's see if we can get something done by the next JavaScript MN meetup, which was in 6 weeks. So 6 weeks, we all had jobs, and we're like, hey, let's try and get something done nights and weekends. And we had to get something done. Putting a deadline on it is a great way to avoid over-engineering a problem. And we built something in those 5 weeks. This is a screenshot of the demo that I gave at JavaScript MN in 2013. Hacking nights and weekends. None of us were full-time on anything. We all had consulting jobs, but we got something done. The code was awful. The UI was kind of rough, but it worked. We could capture errors from a Backbone app in Chrome, but it was enough to prove the idea. that we could track and capture at least one kind of error. And you know what? When I gave this demo, 3 different companies in the audience asked to buy it that day. Now, I couldn't sell it to them. I had no way of taking a credit card, and it didn't really work. But it was validating. It was validating that like somebody was willing to pay money to solve this problem. Because if you're not embarrassed of it, you waited too long to ship. I could have spent 10 weeks, 20 weeks, 50 weeks building this piece of software to learn whether or not it was a good idea. Because there was an even chance it was a bad idea, and nothing would have come to it. But getting it out in front of customers taught me the most important risk that we need to deal with was whether or not somebody was willing to pay for this. So when the guys came up to me and said, hey, I want to buy this, we need this at our company, I had to think, you know, shit, this doesn't actually work for anybody. But it was this huge positive signal. And so we gave ourselves another deadline. I actually closed it like a tentative sale that night and said, hey, you know, we need to polish a few things. Up. We can have this for you in 3 months, and we can release it to you then. So we had 3 months. I gave us another deadline. So we worked for 3 more months, still nights and weekends on the side because we didn't have any money, until we had this fully first usable version, and we brought those first customers on, and they loved it. And I got lots of other anecdotes, if you think this is interesting, about how the early version of TrackJS would, just enough scaling until the system would fall over when the next customer came on, and figuring out what's next, that I'd love to talk about later. So TrackJS, as a company, grew up and changed over the first few years. We got a real logo that didn't just look like a monospace font. We realized how important it was to talk about the things we were doing, to market and do sales and stuff like that, and not just build. We learned how to market our product and to differentiate ourselves from the much larger players in the space, because we're this tiny team out of Minneapolis, and I compete with like New Relic and Dynatrace and these giant companies, those super deep pockets, and yet I have to compete with them and figure out how, like, what are we different at? How do we be better? How do we be faster? And you know what? I do compete with them, and I steal customers from them all the time, and it's great, and I love it. Because it evolved into something really amazing. It's this little library that goes into your web application, regardless of what you use, and it captures the errors that happen, the unhandled exceptions and other faults from your real production environments. And it takes those errors and sends them back to my service, where we normalize them and put cool charts together, like this one, showing you when there's a spike in errors that didn't correlate to a spike in usage. And when you find an error, there's this interesting timeline that says not only that this error happened, but here's everything that led up to it. Gives the developer a story to recreate the situation. It's really cool. If that sounds interesting to you, you can learn more about it with this QR code that just goes to trackjs.com. But if you're in the need and scared of JavaScript breaking in your production environment, I can definitely help with that. So over the first 3 to 4 years, we had transformed the product into something real. Like, this was a real company. It did things. It made money. And it looked like something that didn't just get built in a basement. But it was a lot of work. A lot of work. There's this quote that's common in like founder circles, is that we start companies so that we get to choose which 80 hours per week we want to work. And this is not really exaggerated at all. In the early days of starting your own thing, you are working all the time. All the time. You don't ever get to take a vacation because the system could go down, or you need to close an important sale, or whatever. I worked a lot of hours in the early years. And a lot of weeks, I would put in 40 hours into consulting to pay my bills and actually earn money. And then I would come home, and I would work another 40 hours that week, evenings and weekends, into TrackJS. And it was exhausting. And it was when all my gray hair started to come out. And honestly, there were some really dark times in these. So some of you I might have met at the first time during this phase, and I drank a lot, and I was always burnt out. So if I ever, acted that way, this is why. I was giving everything I had to make this idea work. And your ego gets tied up in the thing you're building. When you're pouring that much time and effort into a piece of software, it becomes you. you personally identify with it. And so I was building TrackJS, I would be out at a conference, or I'd be talking online or something, and somebody would say something nice about TrackJS and how it was cool, and it would be the best day of my life. It'd be like I got the best compliment ever. And then the next day somebody would say, oh, I like New Relic better because of whatever, and I would feel like shit. It was like a personal insult. And that's not at all healthy. It is not at all healthy that that you tie yourself up so much into it, but it happens to so many founders who I know. There were so many days that I wanted to quit. Honestly, I did quit multiple times. Like in my head, I decided, fuck it, I'm out, I'm done, I'm gonna go get a real job. But I'd always come back. I'd always come back to the idea, to TrackJS, because of two people. First, Erin. Erin is my wife, and she has always been the champion and supporter of this since day one. She's super smart and ambitious. When we first started this, she saw the opportunity in it before I did, and she saw the opportunity of what it could mean to not be trading my hours for dollars anymore. She did everything during this process. Like, she helped negotiate deals, she helped me figure out marketing, she would review blog content to make sure I didn't sound like an asshole, which I often sound like an asshole in writing, so that was a hard job. But most importantly, she never let me quit. When things got too much, she always was there to help me kind of through the process. And the second person is Eric. Now, Eric's not the one dressed up as a sloth. That's me dressed up as a sloth, and Eric humoring me, being weird. Eric's kind of like my work wife, I guess. He's been my partner since the beginning of TrackJS. He's one of the smart people that I brought in on that initial idea, and my CTO. He is the one who actually coded a lot of what the product does. And I've never met another engineer who can go from concept to working code faster than Eric. Like, I will be chatting with him, and I'll be like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, like, we had a stack trace, and then, like, we just fetched the code and, like, showed you the code representing the stack trace, like, right there? And he'd be like, oh, yeah, that would be cool. Hang on. And an hour later, he comes back to me. He's like, hey, I got something working. And it's just like, how did you even do that? Now, the code sucks, and he'll admit that it sucks. But it's amazing that he can go that fast. But he's also a leader. And whenever I would burn out and leave and quit and be like, I'm done, he would take over. He would get things done when I couldn't handle it. And if I would burn myself out, he would tell me to take time off and regroup. And I would do the same thing for him. And we had a saying that we would say to each other all the time, we still do, is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's not about getting everything done all the time as fast as possible. It's about how do we make this thing work in the long haul. If we burn ourselves out, then we're gonna have to go get jobs again. He tells this anecdote of when he was in high school, he worked at Chuck E. Cheese. I don't know if there's a Chuck E. Cheese. It's like this like arcade for kids. They had kids' birthday parties there and stuff like that. And there's like a mascot that walks around and greets kids, and there's crappy pizza, and they play video games and that sort of stuff. But anyway, he had the job of, he had to dress up as Chuck E. Cheese. He had to wear the mascot costume. And it wasn't just him, like, he would wear it for 20 minutes, and then it would be too hot, so he'd have to change it out and get it, and somebody else would get into the sweaty costume and be Chuck E. Cheese for a while. Literally the worst job you can imagine. And he brings this up all the time, is like, we got to keep this thing going because I don't want to work at Chuck E. Cheese again. It's like, of course you're not going to work at Chuck E. Cheese, man. Like, you could go be a CTO anywhere. But, like, he's just worried about, like, having to put on the damn mouse costume again. So the lesson here is that if you're trying to break out into your own and build your own thing, you shouldn't do it alone. Unless you are an incredibly strong individual, you can't do it alone. You're going to need people by your side to, like, hold you up when you want to quit. And you need this both at home and at work. The company is going to pull all of your time, and so you need to have a partner or friends or whatever to keep you grounded in reality. And when you care so much about what you're doing and you burn out, you're going to need somebody in the company to help it keep going when you rage quit for a week and debate becoming a farmer instead of software. You need somebody to keep the thing alive when you come to your senses and come back. So that's a story about not going it alone. And I have one story left here, which we're doing pretty good on time. So by 2020, I had achieved what I thought success was. I controlled my time, I controlled my independence, I felt prestige of building something that got used by developers around the world, plus I had some of that sweet, sweet guacamole money in my pocket. And I thought, hey, maybe I just got lucky. Maybe I just, was I in the right place at the right time and that's all this was? Could I do it again? Could I build something else? And despite all the pain, all the stress, all the anxiety that goes into building something, I kind of wanted to do it again. So I looked around for a problem to work on. And at the time, this word was everywhere. It seemed like every vendor was talking about observability. All of my competitors in TrackJS were shifting into talking about these bigger platform problems and why is this different and why is this worth charging so much money on. Everybody was talking about observability, but specifically in the cloud or on Kubernetes or on server stuff. And I'm not really a server guy. I'm more of a client-side guy. So there was very little people talking about end user experience and how it might plug into an observability story. And to me, somebody who always started a project by thinking about the user experience first, that seemed like a real miss. So I started this other idea. We started working on this concept called request metrics. Now, request metrics, the idea behind this was it was going to be the first real client-side observability tool. We were going to look at the APIs of your system and what the users were doing and how your system looked from the end user's perspective. There's a lot of cool concepts there. It's I could judge your API performance not by how fast your servers return, but how fast your clients thought that they were returning. And we could do all this without you having to change any code. You would just drop an analytics agent into the client side, and then poof, automatic instrumentation of your whole system. And we thought that was really cool. We could tell you things like where the user came from, or why were they on the site, or integrating your marketing analytics data into your observability stack. So you could see what's the impact of this API being offline in terms of actual revenue and cool stuff like that. We built this. We built a ton of this, and it worked. And it was cool as hell. And it was a huge mistake. It was a huge mistake. Because I had failed to listen to some of my own lessons. I didn't actually talk to anybody before we started building this. I just thought, hey, I know how to monitor software. I've been in the software monitoring industry game for a long time. I don't need to figure anything out. We'll just build what I think is important. I didn't really talk to DevOps engineers or people who specialize in observability about what they wanted to see from the client side. I didn't really talk to front-end engineers about the gaps they saw in monitoring data. And I didn't really talk to security people about what they saw as opportunities in the client. I just thought, hey, I care about this. Clearly this will be valuable. And it turns out most DevOps people don't give a crap about the client side. And it's just not their scope of responsibility. It might be interesting, but it comes down to actually making changes or getting a budget to get a monitoring tool for client side. It's not there. Nobody cares enough to put any money towards it. And on the front end, I was building this idea for client side observability request metrics was spanning too many different people. It turns out that marketing people really liked the analytics tools they had. And front-end engineers are pretty satisfied with their options for error monitoring. The TrackJS people weren't asking for more things. And security people really liked the security auditing tools that they had. And I was trying to build this product for all of these people and failing at it because I couldn't be good at anything. Compiling my problem, I was using words that front-end people just didn't understand. If I go to a front-end engineer and say observability, their eyes glaze over. It's just not a word that's prevalent in the front-end engineering world. And so I had spent a whole lot of time and a whole lot of energy and honestly a whole lot of money to create something that just wouldn't work. And I did it because I made this big rookie mistake, is that I was building a product that didn't solve a real problem. We need to build products to be successful. You need to build a product that's solving a problem, and that problem needs to cost somebody money. Because unless it costs somebody money by not having that problem, there's no budget to buy something from you, to do something else. And there was no problem that I was solving with client-side observability. I just thought it was a gap in the idea of observability. Like, hey, this thing should exist, I should build it. But nobody wanted it, nobody had a budget for it, nobody was clamoring to solve that problem. I needed to spend more time listening to potential customers if this thing was going to be successful. So you could also say that I failed to listen to this, because I built so much into request metrics. We built a ton of capability into that system that I think is really, really cool. We went way too deep into that product without getting enough validation. And request metrics, that iteration of it, failed. It was a bad product, it didn't work, and we spent way too much time on it. But behind every overnight success is years and years of trying and failing. And so that doesn't mean we quit. We learn from our mistakes, we get up and try again. So I started talking to a lot of people about why this failed. And it's an ongoing process to learn about. This is still a story that is continuing to unfold. And a lot of people, when I would talk about gaps in monitoring of websites and web applications, the things that people commonly would struggle with was web performance. Because web performance is hard. The metrics about what's important seem to continually change. The definition of fast, there's so much FUD in the industry about how fast you need to be, and everybody's idea of performance is a little bit different. And we had a little bit of proof that there was some meat on this problem, because the web performance parts of the request metrics product that we'd already built were some of the most used areas of the product. The handful of customers that we got, because we did get some customers for client-side observability, and the ones that we did would spend most of their time doing web performance stuff. Turns out developers don't know how to make things fast. And it's a problem that got a lot more important recently because of a thing Google did called the Core Web Vitals. Does anybody here know about the Core Web Vitals? A handful of people. Okay, so for those who don't, basically Google has incentivized as a company that we need the search results page to be fast. People will spend more time searching the web if the results are fast. So we need to incentivize people to make fast websites. So they came up with a metric of saying, how do we know if a website is fast? We can't just measure page load, because people can trick page load into looking really fast when they just deliver an empty HTML document, and then Angular wakes up and then does a bunch of super annoying things and takes 20 minutes to load. So we needed a way that we could effectively measure this website versus this website, which one is faster. And they came up with these, the Core Web Vitals, which we're not going to go in. If you want to talk, I can talk for hours. I can do a whole presentation about these, but that's not what they accepted. They wanted to talk about success instead. So let's just say that this is a way that you can measure performance. And Google not only said these are the metrics, but they said this is how fast you need to be. They said this is the number you need to hit to be good. And if you don't, you're going to lose PageRank. So now this suddenly got way more important. Now there is a cost to do this. If you are an e-commerce store, or you are a content publisher, or you are somebody who lives and dies by whether or not you show up on the first page of Google, you care a whole lot about the Core Web Vitals. You care about performance, whereas last year you might not have given a crap at all. So now there's a problem that people are willing to pay to solve. We have an idea. So we started again. We're like, okay, let's figure out request metrics again. We came up with a new logo to signify that we're going to try something new, but we kept the name because we liked the name. And we started building a new thing that was all about the Core Web Vitals. It was like, this is the problem that we need to solve. There's a lot of businesses that depend on their SEO, and it's not clear when they're about to lose their SEO ranking because of performance issues. So let's focus on that. Let's make this big, colorful chart that points at problems very explicitly of hey, here's a big scary yellow thing, you should look at that, and then do all that we can to explain why it's yellow and how to look into it. And it spoke to this very specific problem for this specific group of engineers. And it was trying to address this problem. Through this, we found a problem that was costing money to real people. And this is the path that we're on right now. And I'm not going to show financials or anything like that, but let's just say this is going much better than the last one. Because now we're solving a problem for people that it's cheaper to pay us to solve the problem than to deal with the risks of losing those rankings. So if that sounds like you and you want to talk more about that, you can find out more at requestmetrics.com, or there's a QR code. I'd love to talk more about that later. So that is my 6th story about how I set a giant pile of cash on fire by trying to build something that nobody wanted. So to kind of wrap this up, the definition of success for me has shifted throughout my career. It used to just mean prestige, then it meant independence, and then it meant time, and it's probably going to change again. And your definition doesn't need to be the same as mine. It probably is not the same as mine, and that's okay. But you should know what yours is so that you can think about what moves you should make. Now, I learned some painful lessons over the last 25 years, and I just want to recap them because I think they're really important. First, you don't have as much time as you think. This story can end for any one of us tomorrow. You could walk out and get hit by a bicycle, which I adapted for here because there's more bicycles. Given everything that came out today, it might all be over tomorrow. So do what you think is important, get on it. And don't worry if you don't feel confident in what you're doing. None of us know what we're doing when we start. The people who've come up with the biggest breakthroughs in human history didn't know how to do that breakthrough before they started. They just started and figured it out as they went. And you can do that too. But remember, no matter what you do or what you want out of life, you need to build relationships with people around you. Don't isolate yourself and think you can solve it all by yourself. Those relationships and your ability to talk to other people and create teams is going to pay huge dividends that you could never imagine. People who I met 10 years ago, I have turned around and partnered with on things, and it's been amazing. And you never know what's going to happen when you're first starting. If you choose to go down the entrepreneurial path, the independent hacker kind of thing, like I did, there's a lot of pitfalls that you're going to hit. But you won't hit them unless you ship something. And if you're not embarrassed of it, you're waiting too long. Just throw something together and get it out there and see if anybody cares. Don't worry about it being code that you're proud of. Make sure you leverage the relationships to get people by your side that can help you do it, because you shouldn't do it alone. If you're going to build something successful and durable and it's going to last and it's going to be a big part of your life, you're going to need people to help. And be sure to build products that actually solve real problems that cost people money. Otherwise, you might find yourself building something really cool that nobody's ever going to pay you for, which it's not actually that cool at the end of the day if you can't afford to keep doing it. It's way more satisfying to build something that people actually use and get some of that sweet guacamole money for your trouble. This was Success on Your Own Terms. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming out. There's some stickers and business cards both here and on the rating things on the way out. If you give me a green, you can take a sticker. If you give me a red, you can still take a sticker, but I might feel bad about it. Thank you so much.